Hello my lovelies, I hope you're all well. Today we're going to get some very sage advice from probably one of the most amazing intellectuals of our time, Jordan Peterson. Okay, so grab yourselves a drink. I've literally just finished a cup of tea, so I won't be drinking with you today. But let's find out why a good man is a monster and not weak. 3, 2, 1.
Chaos and order.
Those who have swords and know how to use them, but keep them sheathed, will inherit the world. And that's another thing I've been telling. Yeah, no kidding. And so, like, one of the things I tell young men, well, and young women as well, but the young men really need to hear this more, I think, is that you should be a monster. You know, because everyone says, well, you should be harmless, virtuous. You shouldn't do anyone any harm. You should sheath your competitive instinct. You shouldn't try to win. You know, you don't want to be too aggressive. You don't want to be too assertive. You want to take a back seat and all of that. It's like, no. Wrong. You should be a monster, an absolute monster, and then you should learn how to control it. And that's exactly right. And so when I tell young men that, they think, well, lots of them are competitive. They're low in agreeableness, you know, because that's part of being competitive temperamentally. It's like, is there something wrong with being competitive? There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. There's something wrong with...
I'm not a massively competitive person, I admit. I do inevitably compare myself to other people. Obviously, mostly other women I will compare myself to, probably physically and in terms of success and all that stuff. But I'm not massively competitive, no. But I don't see that... I think competition with yourself is healthy, though.
Cheating. There's something wrong with being a tyrant. There's something wrong with winning unfairly. All of those things are bad. But you don't want people to win? What's the difference between trying to win and striving? You want to eradicate striving?
No.
The persona, you could say, is...
participation trophies. That's all I'm going to say.
A good way of thinking about it, you know, you watch all those rom-coms where there's always kind of a beta male guy who's being real friendly and always failing miserably with the women because basically he's lying to himself and to them.
Yeah.
He's a persona. And a persona is the face that you show to the world when you're trying to pretend and to convince yourself and others that you're, I would say harmless, but we could say a good person. But a good person isn't harmless. A good person is capable of, well, maybe a good person is capable of anything, but is willing to hold that in abeyance. I read this interesting commentary a little while ago on a statement by Christ in the New Testament, and the statement generally interpreted is that the meek shall inherit the earth, but I was looking up the multiple translations of the word meek, and meek is actually derived from a Greek word, of course, because the Bible, at least some of the original forms of the Bible, were in Greek. And that word didn't exactly mean meek. It meant something like...
Download a free audiobook with your 30-day trial.
The suspense.
Those who have weapons and the ability to use them, but determined to keep them sheathed, will inherit the world. And that means that people who are capable of force, let's say, but decide not to use it, are in the proper moral position. And Nietzsche commented on that a fair bit too. You know, he thought of most morality as cowardice, not because morality itself was cowardice, but because most people who are cowards disguise their cowardice as morality, and they claim that their harmlessness, which is actually a consequence of their fear and inability to be harmful, say, or to be dangerous, is actually a sign of their moral integrity. And that's a really bad idea. So, you know, if you're an axe murderer...
No one wants a beta male in charge. We don't, you know, it's that whole thing of strong men create easy times create weak men create hard times. And I think we, certainly us in the Western world anyway, we have had a real easy time over the past few decades, real easy. So we're now in a society that is becoming weaker, and it shows, you know. We're in the middle of some hard times now. I say in the middle, we're going into some hard times. Cost of living through the roof, fuel prices through the roof. Everything is getting harder, and it's going to take some strong men and women to get us out of it. And what's that saying? It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
You don't have an axe. That doesn't mean that you're moral.
No.
So now with regards to, so that's the persona. And the persona is the mask that you wear, and that's what persona means, is the mask that you wear to convince yourself and the world that you're not a terrible monster, so that when you look at yourself in the mirror, you don't have to run away screaming. You know, and you might think, well, that's a bit of an overstatement, but Jung was very interested in phenomena such as, say, the psychological phenomena that would characterize the actions of someone who might be an Auschwitz camp guard, for example. And, you know, that's a pretty monstrous form of behavior. And the thing about Auschwitz camp guards is that there's no reason to assume, really, that they were much different than normal people. Now, there would have been exceptions, obviously. And what that means is that perhaps you too could be an Auschwitz camp guard, and perhaps you would even derive some...
100%. 100%. Ty! Sorry, that's my dog. But yeah, Jordan Peterson actually recommended a book that I bought my husband. It's called Ordinary Men, and it goes through this this situation where the men and the women who were the camp guards and you know, the SS and all that, they were just ordinary people. And they got corrupted, and it could happen to anybody. You know, if we've seen anything over the past 2 years in the world, it's that people are so quick to jump to authoritarianism. And, you know, I've been against all of the restrictions basically from day one. I thought they were unnecessary. I didn't like the fact that we were following the lockdown protocol that other countries have put in place, and I stand by that. Sorry, I just have to let my dog out. What are you doing? I don't have any sausages for you. Oh, sorry. I'm back. Yeah. Anyway, let's get on with watching this.
Enjoyment out of it, and you might think not, but you shouldn't think not so quickly. And what that also implies is that if you could see what that meant when you looked in the mirror and looked at yourself, you might run away screaming, because you'd have a revelation of just exactly what the human being is capable of.
Absolutely.
And that's a very unpleasant revelation, and also one of the things that stops people from being enlightened, because that revelation of the evil of the self is part of the journey to enlightenment, and an early part. Now, the shadow would be all the parts of the personality that the persona rejects, and that might be the aggressive elements. Certainly that's the case for people who are hyper-agreeable. And now you can tell, I think one of the best, there's two pathways to the development of the shadow, and they're tightly allied with one another. The fundamental pathway is truth, and that's to face the bitter truth about yourself. But to break that down more particularly, you might think about that as the capacity to observe your own resentment. You're going to be resentful and bitter in many situations because you don't get what you want. And if you watch that resentment and bitterness, you'll see that it produces fantasies that can be unbelievably dark. And that can be very frightening, and you might not want to admit to yourself that you're actually capable of having fantasies like that, or impulses like that, or aggressive feelings like that. But the thing is that if those aggressive feelings and impulses and fantasies are integrated into your character, it's like you're opening up a dialogue with a part of yourself that can be very forceful and strong and dangerous. And it's really useful to be dangerous, because if you can be dangerous, you often don't have to be. And so anyways, you attend to your resentment honestly and you observe yourself and what you're actually like. You got to pay attention as if you don't know yourself, as if you might harbor hidden devils, and then maybe they'll emerge. Now, Jung also felt that sort of embedded inside the shadow were the contrasexual tendencies. And so, for example, sometimes you see people who are well-developed, men, let's say, and we can also talk about women in this regard. Men who've integrated their shadow often also develop a kind of peculiar grace that would be a consequence of not only allowing their aggressive side to step forward, but also their feminine and compassionate side that they may have kept squelched because of embarrassment about it, or because they'd been harassed for being weak, or any number of things. So, but the practical approach for developing your shadow, I would say, is to contemplate and consider your resentment and notice what it says. And because your resentment will also tell you what you have to say. If you're feeling oppressed at work, or you're oppressed in your life, or you're oppressing yourself, then you got to notice that you're feeling oppressed. Then you have to notice that you're feeling resentful and angry and bitter, and maybe even like Cain in the story of Cain and Abel.
I have felt very, very resentful and bitter over the last 2 years, I tell you. I don't like having my freedoms taken away. I don't.
Cain is sort of the archetypal bitter man. And then you have to decide what it is that you need to do in order to remove from yourself that bitterness. And that usually means that there's something that you have to say. And then you have to say it because your soul depends on it. And not only does your soul depend on it, I would say the fate of the world depends on it. Because, you might be wrong and then you should be straightened out. Maybe you're just being whiny and you have to talk to somebody about that. But it may be that you're actually detecting something wrong, some tyranny that's directed towards you and other people. And it's like your moral obligation to speak up about it. Practical approach for developing your shadow fundamentally is radical honesty. And Jung said that, a genuine moral effort was a good substitute for psychotherapy.
Wow. Honestly, I just think the way that Jordan Peterson puts things, it's just, it makes it so easy to understand. Will you stop whinging? He's desperate for a treat. But he's eaten them all. He doesn't have any. The way he puts things, I'm such a fan. Sorry. I do have his 12 Rules for Life book. I haven't read it all yet because some of it is quite heavy going. And, as much as I would like to think that I'm an intellectual, I am nowhere near that level. So yeah, some of it is quite heavy going. And, I'm just a simple girl. But let me know if you would like to see me react to some more Jordan Peterson. I watch his stuff anyway, so I might as well watch it with you. But let me know if you enjoy it. I hope you enjoyed that video. I'll see you very soon.